What's up guys? My name is Kaye Ramos and welcome to my channel where I share things about Christian living, journaling, and now more on homemaking. Few weeks ago, I shared a video where I talk about some ways and how I cut down costs on our food budget without of course sacrificing the quality. So in case you have not seen it yet, I will link it down below. So huge portion why I'm able to do that is because I have been learning over the years some traditional skills which we will talk about today, and I'm so excited to share those with you. So first of all, why do we call these traditional skills? I guess because these are the skills that our ancestors used to do back when it was not yet highly industrialized. And I'm so happy and pleased to see that they are slowly being revived by so many people nowadays. So I like learning these skills because it allows me to really incorporate real and whole foods in our diet, just as how God intended for us. So with that being said, let's dive in. First one is learning to bake using sourdough starter. So you're probably sick and tired of hearing about sourdough baking, but before being a homemaker, I actually didn't really know how to cook. So I was surrounded by people who are very good in cooking, and so I did not see the need to learn it. So I guess when you are young, you tend to be very short-sighted. So that's one thing I regret, not taking advantage of the opportunity to learn from my mom, from my aunts while I was still with them. So I jumped in learning sourdough baking around 2019, and it's really just out of curiosity. And to be honest with you, I actually prefer baking using sourdough starter because for me it's more flexible. So I've tried baking yeast breads using the regular yeast, but it's always a hit and miss for me because yeast can be very sensitive. If you put too hot, then you kill it. If you put too cold, then it will not bloom, it will not proof, things like that. So I remember my first Thanksgiving here in US and we hosted. So I wanted to prepare a real Thanksgiving dinner. So naturally, I Googled Thanksgiving dinner recipes, and one that's always there is dinner roll. So, oh my goodness. I made dinner rolls using yeast, and they turned out like rocks. Like you really can't eat them. So good thing I did a dry run. So in the end, we bought King's Hawaiian rolls, and I placed them on a baking tray and I warmed them up in the oven. So when guests arrived, I basically just brushed melted butter just to show that I baked this from scratch. I don't know if they realized that I bought it from store. Maybe they did and they were just polite not to tell me. Anyway, what I like about sourdough baking is it's, like I said, it's more flexible. So if you get lazy or change plans for the day, then you can put it in the fridge and let it proof and it will not ruin it, and it will actually ferment it longer, which is more beneficial for you. One caveat though is it requires more planning because you can't just let it proof for 2 hours, then bake it like usual yeast bread. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes a habit. Yeah, you're probably aware of the sourdough rage lately, especially during the pandemic. But if you want to start learning to bake using sourdough starter, as if I am an expert here, I suggest that you buy a mature starter instead of making your starter from scratch. Unless, of course, you want to go through that process. Personally, I've actually undergone through 3 starters already. One died. It's natural death because I neglected it when I was pregnant due to morning sickness. The second one was accidentally cremated by my husband when he was preheating the oven. So both of those, I bought them as dehydrated versions and they rehydrated perfectly. One thing I noticed though is that both of them are having hard time activating during winter or when it's cold. So now I'm on my 3rd starter, which I bought as a real starter, which means it's in liquid form. And oh my goodness, it's the most active starter I have. I swear, even during the coldest day, it activates like crazy. I actually got it from a seller on Etsy, and I will link it below if I could still find her so we can support her. Anyway, right now I know how to bake sourdough bread, focaccia, pizza, and other quick baked goods so far, and the flavor is outstanding, and not to mention, of course, all the savings we've had so far from not buying bread and baked goods outside. Second is making bone broth from scratch. So this one is actually a huge budget saver for us because I can incorporate the broth and make lots of nourishing soups and meals. And to be honest with you, sometimes the broth that you buy in store, they're full of sodium, even those that are claiming healthy and organic. And you see that there's natural flavor in the ingredient list, but what really is that natural flavor? I mean, I don't know. So real bone broth is a great healing food as it helps in digestion, it improves immunity, and of course, as they say, it helps you to have a glowing skin. So I buy a whole chicken, then simmer it with aromatics like onion, peppercorn, and some vegetables like celery and carrots. And it makes a super nourishing soup that you can drink on its own, or what I like to do is use it as a base for many soup recipes we eat during the week. And also, I shred the chicken and I use it for something else, or if I have no energy to cook, I freeze it for later use. Lately, I am so pleased because I found a ranch close to us that sells quality meat and poultry, and I can buy beef bones from them, but they tend to get quite pricey because it's by the pound. And we all know that beef bones are so heavy. So I am resorting on the second option, which is probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it's one of the most flavorful and healthy things you can include in your broth. And that is chicken feet. So I buy chicken feet from them and sometimes neck and bones. And that makes the most flavorful, my goodness, and gelatinous broth that you can make. I know the way they raise their meat, so I am confident incorporating those. So they're pasture raised, they're organic. Plus, in Asia, where we live, we are so used to incorporating chicken feet and other unusual organs or cut of meat in our diet. So it's not something that I'm like, oh, what is this? Okay? So if you are wondering how you can make your broth more gelatinous, chicken feet are the way to go. Third skill I learned is to mill my own flour. So right now, I am milling my own flour with the help of my grain mill, which is here. And I am able to make my custom flour like Ezekiel flour, mill my own rice flour, or any combination of flour. So I'm actually experimenting with different recipes lately because it's quite difficult to look for recipes that use freshly milled flour and of course incorporate sourdough starter. So I am slowly familiarizing myself on how each grain behaves depending on the recipe, how I could adjust it. But through trial and errors, I'm beginning to build a collection of recipes that I can rely on. Like for example, Ezekiel sourdough waffles, sourdough pizza crust, and other baked goods that use freshly milled flour. I know that having a grain mill is such an investment up front, but it's something that I am so pleased right now. It gives me so much flexibility, and I am happy that I can incorporate the entire part of the grain in our diet. So what you could see right now is the Como Fidibus Classic, and it took me a long time to decide on what brand to buy because there are very few videos and reviews about it. Most information I see out there are about Macmill, and I chose this one because one blogger who specializes in sourdough made a comparison between this and Macmill, and this one grinds finer than Macmill. So there's just a slight difference. Both of them are good, but I think because I am doing mostly sourdough, I want it to be super fine. That's why I went with Como. Fourth skill that I am learning is cooking from dried goods. Okay, so honestly, this one, I still have a long way to go because I am slowly building my dried goods bulk pantry. So some of the things that I have bought, I am not yet super familiar with them, but I would like to incorporate them more often in our diet, like for example barley, lentils, beans, spelt, things like that. So I am ready to learn. I'm excited to experiment, and it's something that makes me excited in the kitchen. So it may be a hassle sometimes compared to having a canned version, but once it becomes a habit again, it's a lot easier to do. So for instance, for beans, lentils, or quinoa, I soak and cook big batch, then I freeze them in portions so it's easy to take what I need. My next project also would be making my own multigrain rice blend because I have tried different brands in the past and we love them so much, but they tend to be pricey. So here I'm thinking of incorporating wild rice, other types of rice, barley, things like that. Fourth is soaking and sprouting. So this is another thing that's very overwhelming for me, but once I gave it a go, I realized that it's not actually very difficult. It may seem laborious, but actually there's not a lot of actual hands-on involved because it's mostly the waiting time. I don't soak and sprout all of my dried goods because it will shorten the shelf life. But right now, I only soak and sprout those that we often use, like spelt, einkorn, and combination of beans that we use for Ezekiel flour. So the reason why we soak and sprout is because grains contain anti-nutrients and phytic acid, and that may affect your body's absorption of nutrients. So if I am making a sourdough bread, I simply use the regular milled grain because it will ferment anyway. But for quick breads like muffin, waffles, I always use the sprouted version. Of course, if I do it at home, it's a lot cheaper because if you go and buy the sprouted one, I think it's 3 times or 4 times the price. Fifth skill that I'm learning is cooking from whole foods. So I don't know if this is actually a traditional skill because it's probably a typical scenario for many households, but as someone who did not cook before and who's used to seeing people around me cook things from whole foods, I consider it an achievement to be able to, prepare something from scratch. As years go by, our goal is to rely less on prepackaged foods. So I'm proud that I am comfortable cooking an entire roasted chicken now and incorporate it into different meals because I didn't know those things before. So I like the creativity of coming up with meals using seasonal ingredients available around me because to be honest with you, this is a huge challenge when I got married because the ingredients that I am used to seeing when I was young are not accessible where I am here in US. So technically it's a whole new ball game for me, and each year I am improving and I try to incorporate new ingredient and learn new type of cooking so that I could be a better cook in the kitchen. 6 is growing things from seed. So I like gardening ever since I was young because my father is a farmer and I grew up weeding rows and rows of tomatoes, corn, and basically helping harvest rice grain during harvest season. So to me, gardening is such a part of my life and it's a peaceful activity, but I've actually only grown few things like herbs, some greens, and for the past few years, we still bought our starters and that could get pretty pricey. So this year, since we have our own greenhouse, we are planning to start most things from seed. And based from my failures and successes in the past few years, I am more comfortable now in growing most of them, maybe not all. I know that I barely scratched the surface when it comes to traditional skills, and I know that there are still so many things to learn, but I don't want to overwhelm myself. And next on my list, especially this growing season, is to learn how to preserve, like canning, making jams, syrup, fruit fillings, things like that. How about you? What traditional skill are you proud to have learned? So I know some seasoned homemakers here, or even not homemakers, will probably laugh that I'm geeking out to learn these things because it's just a typical scenario in their household. But hey, any learning is a huge achievement. Hopefully this video inspires you somehow, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can hang out more often. This is Kaye, and see you guys again next time. Bye for now.